Now let's bring in our guest, Eric Kennedy. He's the senior editor over at Big Blue Interactive. Eric, first of all, hope you and your family, everybody in your world, are safe and healthy.
Yeah, we're doing great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Before we get going, why don't you tell folks where they can find your work and check out everything on BBI?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's bigblueinteractive.com is the website. We've been in business since 1995. It's basically a place where Giants fans can get news and information on the team, and we have the most popular section is a fan forum, so it's sort of like almost like a cyber bar where people talk about the Giants all day long. So it gets quite lively over there, but that's the site in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Lively, I think, is a good way to put it. What do you think, Eric, has been, in your opinion, the biggest story has been and topic for you guys over at BBI this offseason?
Well, I think it's what a lot of people are talking about. It's the COVID issue, obviously, and how the teams are going to be handling this. It's interesting. It's an awkward time, I think, to be a fan, because I think you can almost sense the nervousness with fans about, is this season really even going to happen? So I almost don't sense the build-up yet, because I think there are some fans out there that don't expect it to happen, and there are others who are crossing their fingers. So I think when we get into the full practices that are, I think, around the 17th or the 18th of this month, and we start seeing more videos from Giants.com of the players actually practicing in lieu of the preseason, I think the expectations will build up. But from a fan point of view, I mean, obviously the COVID thing has dominated the discussions. There are football issues too, but that's been the number one, I think.
Yeah, look, I could tell you, I was at the facility this morning, and there are guys wearing football jerseys running around. It was great to see. It's something we haven't seen in a long time, with obviously, no spring workouts or anything like that going on this particular offseason. So we're getting there, and we should have our first OTA-style practice the week of August 10th or 11th, give or take, and then we'll get padded practices starting on the 17th, Eric. So when it comes to the football stuff, what do you think the biggest conversation piece has been from fans heading into 2020?
Well, I think there's a mixture of things. I think, fans are very excited to see how Daniel Jones' evolution continues. I think fans are, aside from the fumbling issue that he had last year, I think fans are very excited about his future, and you combine that with Saquon Barkley. And I think there is an expectation that if the Giants can finally get a offensive line that is somewhat functioning in front of these players, that they can actually be pretty decent on offense. The other issue, on the other side of the ball, the major concern has been, where is the pass rush going to come from? Of course, with Marcus Golden coming back this week, and I think there have been a few. There are other players on the edge rushers that are being not talked about enough. I think Fackrell, for instance, was an interesting signing that could pay dividends for them. But I think, the discussion has been about the pass rush. And then the other concern, obviously, is the status of DeAndre Baker. And is he going to be back with the team, or is he on his way out? And I know you can't comment on that. No one really knows for sure anyways. But that's been a concern, because I think a lot of fans thought, all right, we're okay on the defensive line. It looks like we've built up a lot of talent in the secondary, but then the DeAndre Baker thing comes out, and then so that throws a fly in the ointment there, and people are wondering who's going to play that position right now.
What do you think? How do you think that's going to go in the secondary? Put the safeties aside for a second. You need three cornerbacks now that are capable starters, if not more, to give yourself some type of backstop due to injury. And other than James Bradbury, I mean, this thing is as wide open at cornerback as I've ever seen it. What's your take on how this is going to go down, and who do you think the favorite in the clubhouse is, and what do you think the overall consensus is for both those spots, the second outside spot and the nickel?
I don't think there is a consensus with opposite of Bradbury. I think that's the big question mark. I mean, Bradbury's actually, obviously, barring injury or something unforeseen, he's obviously going to man one of the starting spots. And as you just said, you're really talking, when you're talking starters, your third corner is really a starter in the league now. So I think the expectation among fans is when they drafted Darnay Holmes, he's going to eventually end up being the nickel guy. But now he may actually be pressed into the outside spot unless Corey Valentine or Sam Beal impress in camp. The real issue here, and you know this, is without the preseason and with only a limited number of practices this year, they don't have a lot of time to sort this thing out. I actually really like this team the way it's being built right now. I think in a normal year, fans would be very excited at least to see what's going on. But the thing that worries me, and Joe Judge has really got a lot on his plate, is how do you get this team together and without the preseason and with so few practices? So somebody like Corey Valentine or Sam Beal right from the start are going to have to show something, I think, and to lock down that other spot. The best thing, obviously, would be if DeAndre comes back and you have the first-round talent added to that mix and he's got his head clear. But as I mentioned the other day on the site, the big worry with him, too, even if he does come back, he was sort of away from the team during the virtual learning sessions during the off season. So you wonder how much it's going to take for him to be caught up to speed with the playbook and the terminology, interacting with the coaching staff. If he was in the picture, it's a much different conversation. So when that came out, I was like, oh man, that's the last thing we need. But again, I think they're okay with Bradbury. And Corey Valentine, and this seems to be consensus on the website, is I think, a lot of people saw him last year and he was always getting exposed in coverage, but they had him playing a lot inside. Yep. And I don't think that really was his natural position. I think he's more of an outside corner. So I think, he flashed some things in the preseason because of some of the issues they were having last year in the secondary. They were forced to move him inside, and I don't really think that suited his game. So it wouldn't shock me if he's a guy that fans think can't play, but if they put him in the right position, that wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being a decent player for them. So, yeah, but to answer your question, I don't think there's a consensus who's going to play opposite Bradbury. I mean, that's one of the big unknowns of camp, I think.
Yeah, and with no preseason games, I would just tell folks, stay tuned to, BBI obviously will have, kind of tracking what all the beat reporters are saying, and Giants.com will the video from practice, because that's what coaches are going to go on here. And it would be easy to say that, all right, we got a veteran cornerback here that's done it well for a long time. Maybe he's a little bit older, but at least you can trust him. There's just so little tape on all these guys that are competing for these spots that, boy, it is just going to be, may the best man win, and I think it's really going to be an open competition. How excited do you think fans, Eric, are for Xavier McKinney and exactly how the Giants might decide to use him?
Well, I think they're very excited. I think when you look at what they've assembled at the safety spot right now, they've got a lot of different guys there that can do different things. And I hate to sound like Joe Judge here, but they're multiple. They can play in different positions. So Xavier is a guy that even played some cornerback in college. Now they're not going to play them at the pro level, but you could even see him maybe even be in a nickel spot at times, depending on what packages they're in. But Xavier can move all over the place. He's a good blitzer. He's not a big guy, but when you look at his highlights in college, he's a very good player when moving forward and attacking the line of scrimmage and attacking the quarterback. And Jibril Peppers, I still don't think we've seen his ceiling yet. He's one of those guys where I think coaches look at him and I think James Betcher last year wanted to use him differently than he did. I really think that they wanted to use him as more of a blitzer at times, and so when you have him and Julian Love and Xavier McKinney, I think you're going to see packages, especially with the question marks at corner, that I wouldn't be surprised if you see those three guys on the field a lot. And again, if you listen to any of the Giants coaches this offseason, from Patrick Graham to Joe Judge, they keep talking about being multiple and changing based on the opponent and doing different things and not being pegged into doing one thing. So I think we're going to see different game plans, different formations for each opponent, and that's kind of interesting and exciting to watch. So McKinney definitely fits into that because he can do so many different things, and because Jibril Peppers can do so many different things, I think they can keep offensive coordinators guessing a little bit. play it right.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, if you want to pick out a guy that has a legitimate chance to have a, quote-unquote breakout season, I think it's Jibril Peppers. I think it's going to be tough for maybe some of the second-year guys with a new system, new coaches, no offseason. But for a guy like Peppers entering his fourth year, he's done this a long time. They have guys that can cover and do other stuff in the secondary to let him kind of do what he does best. I'm with you. I think, if he can take advantage of the situation he's put in, he has a chance to have a bit of a breakout year. How excited were the fans to know for sure that they were going to have Marcus Golden back? And how do you see them trying to split the reps now between two younger guys in Carter and Zimenez and the two veterans in Fackrell and Golden?
Yeah, I think, fans never expected to get Marcus Golden back at that price, and I think they didn't expect him to be back after free agency was a week or so in. I think most people, including myself, thought, well, he's gone. And the odd thing was you didn't hear him being mentioned with other teams and visits and so forth. He's a productive player, and in a league that's dying for players, he's never going to be the guy, that one pass rusher that everybody fears and everyone game plans for. But he is certainly one of those guys that is very productive as a secondary guy, and he was the Giants' best pass rusher last year, and teams crave guys that can rush the passer. So I was a little bit surprised he was out there. And then when they put that May 5th tender on him, which now in hindsight looks like a brilliant move to have him back, it at least gives them insurance with if Fackrell, Zimenez, and Carter are going to develop. And now Fackrell is interesting because under Patrick Graham, when Patrick was coaching the linebackers in Green Bay, he had his best season. And if you look at his statistics last year rushing the passer in Green Bay, he didn't have the sack numbers, but he had the pass rush numbers. He had the pressure numbers. So, again, I'm not saying he's going to be an the Giants, I think all fans know, the one thing this defense really lacks right now, and they're going to have to address at some point in the future, is that pass rusher that scares people. They don't have that right now, so they're going to have to use a committee approach. They're going to have to scheme it a little bit. But I think they've got some interesting guys that they can, and Joe Judge talked about this today, during his presser. They have some interesting guys with skill sets that they can mix and match depending on the opponent that they're facing. So I'm not quite as down on the pass rush as people are. I think they can. I think we definitely need that guy still. But if I think the key guy, to be honest with you, here is Lorenzo Carter. He's the one guy that everybody keeps expecting big things from, and I think this is a really big year for him. I think. Yeah. If he develops into a guy that can get 7, 8, 9 sacks, and you combine that with Fackrell and Golden, and Zimenez actually looked decent last year rushing the passer in spots. I think his run defense is what needs improving. But I think they've got some guys that they can roll out there and at least keep people honest. And get some pressure on the quarterback. So to answer your question, fans are thrilled that he's back because I think it's an area that everyone recognizes we need to have pass rushers.
Yeah, and look, I think you hit it. Based on the pass rush and the conversation we had on the secondary, what's going to determine this season, Eric, and we're joined by Eric Kennedy again, senior editor over at BBI, Big Blue Interactive, is how well the Giants stop the pass. Because if you go back to last year, whenever the Giants need to get off the field on a third down or, get a lead late and they're trying to stop the other team from coming back and re-grabbing the lead or, getting a team out of their 4-minute offense, they can get the ball back and score. They were not able to get a stop. And the question is whether or not, with this group of players, and a lot of them are young, are they going to be able to get those stops when they need them at the end of these games when games are decided? And usually at those times, it's done with the pass.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of games over the last number of years outside of 2016 where that's been the case, where Eli got the lead and they just couldn't hold it, or they needed a key stop at some point in the game and they just couldn't get the ball back. And you hit the nail on the head. It's I think the one thing that drives a lot of Giants fans that are a little bit older, who grew up with this team, even in the years that it wasn't the Giants weren't having a great year, they always had a respectable defense. And again, outside of 2016, since the last Super Bowl, the defense has struggled, and it's gotten to the point where fans expect the worst to happen, and that's a bad thing. You can almost sense it in the stands when oh geez, here we go, we're going to give up this game. That's what they need to get back to, is stopping the other team when the game's on the line. Either get the ball back, force a turnover, or when they've got the lead, basically shut the other team down. And as you just said, the pass rush and the coverage and the pass defense, that's key, and that's what's really been their Achilles heel. And it's not just been the cornerbacks and the safeties, but it's been the linebackers in coverage, because how many times have we seen the tight end run over the middle and get the key first down or get the touchdown? Even the game last year when we were playing the Eagles, when the Eagles had so many injuries.
Here comes Boston Scott.
Yeah, and they had one tight end left, and they didn't cover the guy. I mean, that's the kind of thing, and everyone knew it. Everyone knew that that's where the ball was going, and then you had two giants looking at each other in the end zone, going, "Wasn't he your guy?" I mean, that's the frustration level. But I think they've got the players, they're getting there. They're getting some of these players that can do those types of things. Obviously, the DeAndre Baker thing hurts, but they're starting to get, when they get people like a Xavier McKinney, and Julian Love is showing some flashes, and they've got, if you look at the depth chart right now, I was just looking at how many linebackers are on this team right now. They've got a lot of young linebackers, and if one or two or three of these guys can do something, I think they're building the right thing. And what I really think the strength of the defense is, honestly, is the defensive line. I think they've got a lot of guys up front that are big, young, strong guys that I think offensive lines are going to have trouble with, and I think they're just scratching the surface. I'm very excited about Dexter Lawrence. Dalvin Tomlinson really showed some signs of life last year. The Leonard Williams, I know he gets a lot of grief from the fans, but he is a good football player. He is a guy that can contribute into a solid, strong defense up front. And then, of course, you got B.J. Hill. So I think you've got guys on the defensive line that can cause problems, they can disrupt. So now if we can just get those edge rushers and then the coverage, I think they have the ability to at least play some decent defense. What's going to be interesting to see Patrick Graham, how he handles this, because I think if the other question here is, you were asking what are fans talking about. One of the things that they're talking about is Patrick Graham, and because he had such a limited track record in Miami, Giants are familiar with him because he was here before, obviously, on the coaching staff, and he had a good reputation up in New England. But I think Giants fans are a little bit nervous because of the Miami Dolphins connection.
Yeah, and look, I don't think anyone knows what these schemes are going to look like either. I mean, we just haven't seen it yet. I'll know a little bit more in a week, but right now,
Yeah.
It's funny, like you joke, but you guys have seen as much as I have, and I'm going to ask you about the offense in a second, but I'll try to carry off your point. You're right about the defensive line, by the way. I was going to ask you about that, and I don't have to, but. Like, you guys have seen pretty much as much of Joe Judge as I have. I mean, you guys have seen the same press conferences and Zoom calls that I have. You've seen the same stuff on Giants Life that I have. I haven't been within 5 feet of Joe Judge since, like, the day he did his opening press conference, pretty much. So I think we're all kind of, and all of us are kind of figuring this out as we go along.
Well, you know what I like that he did that I don't see really getting a lot of attention is, and I know it's a minor thing, but when the Giants came to camp or started camp, they started off with the 90-man roster limit, and they decided to change it to the 80-man roster limit. And there was debate on the site which was better, 90 or the 80. But Joe Judge is a very young coach who's never been a head coach at any level. He's got a really interesting coaching staff. I think his coaching staff is fascinating. The number of former head coaches that are there. There are college coaches, pro coaches, some guys one guy that came out of retirement. I think it's really interesting staff. But he's a very young coach, and you could make the argument that somebody in his position that once he made a decision, he wouldn't want to change his mind because publicly people might look at it and say, well, he's already second guessing himself. But something caused him, and it might have been the Nate Solder issue. Then when Nate Solder decided to opt out, and then they had to, when they moved from when they were going to keep the 90-man roster, the rookies would have to stay in a split squad, and now with the 80-man roster, the rookies can actually work with the veterans. He changed and decided to go with the 80, and I think that's pretty telling that he's not afraid to make corrections, and he's not afraid to make changes, even if the optics might look a little bad to the press. So I actually think that was a pretty remarkable move and a pretty telling move, that here's a guy who's flexible enough to say, hey, I've changed my mind and I want to do it differently. So I actually applaud him for doing that.
Yeah, I've been very confident in what I've seen, Eric. He seems to be, someone that, doesn't just throw out like one-liners and phrases. He believes what he says. He has a reason for everything that he does. And he just seems to be a pretty cerebral guy, which is good to see. Now, offensively, I've had to fight off calls for 7 months on Big Blue Kickoff from fans complaining about this skill position group. And I understand the point. They do not have that number one option, that DeAndre Hopkins, that Julio Jones. I get that, and obviously you prefer to have one of those guys than not. No argument, seated. But the idea that this team and Daniel Jones does not have enough weapons, with a young receiver that's getting better in Slayton, two guys that we know can separate and get open in Tate and Shepard. Shepard's injury history, fair point, can't argue with it. Evan Ingram's injury history, fair point, can't argue with it. But in terms of a matchup tight end, he's one of the best in the league as a receiver. And then you have Saquon Barkley, who can basically be a receiver if you want him to, in addition to being, probably the most elusive running back in the league. So I don't get why there's so much concern over the skill positions on offense. Now, next year, if we'll see what happens. You're gonna have to draft somebody, maybe, but at least for this year, if these guys are healthy, I think that's a pretty good group.
Yeah, I'm with you on this, and I don't actually see a lot of disagreement with that, at least on my site.
Well, that's good. I'm happy to hear that.
You're always going to have somebody complain about something. I mean, that's just normal, and everybody wants the perfect roster. I think the big concern is what you mentioned, is as long as everybody stays healthy, and that's the key, because last year, as we know with Daniel Jones, he never had this group on the field together as a group all year long. They were never, none of these players, all these players weren't together for one game last year. And then there's the issue, you see Evan Ingram in one game and you say, wow, that guy is a superstar waiting to happen, and then he disappears the next game, and then he's on injured reserve. Sterling Shepard, I love watching this guy play, but I think we're all still waiting for that big monster 1,000-yard season out of him that he just can't seem to crack, and now the concern is with the concussions. So as long as everyone stays healthy, I still think, and now you're going to get lots of young fans that I think recognize this, but I still think we as a group, because we've just been beaten down with the losing the last few years, I still think we underappreciate how good Saquon Barkley is. I had a discussion with somebody the other day, and they were still arguing whether we should have drafted Saquon Barkley in the draft. And you could make that argument. The one argument you could make is, should the Giants have traded down, given where they were in the rebuilding process, should they have traded down and accumulated more draft picks to rebuild the team? That's a fair argument, but I look at that draft and I say he's the best player to come out of that draft, and he does things. I'm 52. He does things I've never seen a player do on the football field. In the old days, there was this George Young was once interviewed about Lawrence Taylor, and he said if you didn't know anything about football, your eyes would gravitate towards Lawrence Taylor, because he was the best player on the field, and you could tell even if you didn't know anything about football. Same thing with Saquon Barkley. When you watch him play, he's running at a different speed than anybody else. So I think any offense that has Saquon Barkley in it, as long as you have a decent offensive line, is going to be dangerous. But then, as you said, Darius Slayton had an amazing year last year. Golden Tate is still playing well. Sterling Shepard is a guy that can give people issues out of the slot and over the middle, and he still makes some really amazing catches in the red zone and so forth. So I think as long as these guys, and you mentioned Evan Ingram, so now you've got Daniel Jones maybe throwing a lot to Saquon Barkley out of the backfield, because I think Jason Garrett's going to really use Saquon in the passing game, and I think I think this offense can cause a lot of problems for teams, especially teams that don't have good linebackers in coverage. I think this is going to be an issue for a lot of teams defending this. It just gets back to the team health. Sterling Shepard, can you stay healthy? Evan Ingram, can you stay healthy? Can everybody play together on the field? And if they can, I think this is an interesting team. And then you got a few other guys I'm still curious to see, like Corey Coleman. You know, he got his season ended last year because of the knee issue. But he was supposedly showing some good things early in camp too. So I'm actually curious to see how even a guy like him, if this coaching staff can get something out of him.
You know, Eric, I thought we were done talking about the offensive line finally. I really did. I thought we were. Now, look, it was still a matter of Nate Solder having a bounce-back year, and, you know, Dave Gettleman talked about that. Nate talked about that. Everyone knew that he expected himself to play better this year, and that's fine. But removing him from the equation is a different situation, because now, while you figured Andrew Thomas was going to earn one of the 2 starting spots, now he, really needs to be good enough to be good at one of those starting spots. And then you have Cam Fleming, who's never been a full-time starter. He started a bunch of games, but never been a full-time starter. And then you have Matt Parrott, who a lot of people thought, give him a redshirt year with the no offseason, maybe a year and a half redshirt. Who knows?
Right.
And now you're going to have to figure this out here and make the best of it, and you don't have somebody with the track record of Solder as a, average to above average level starter in this league that you can kind of count on, and you're kind of back into the land of the unknown a little bit.
Yeah, talk about pressure on Andrew Thomas here. Full disclosure, I was a big fan of the Giants drafting him, so he was the guy that I thought was the best lineman coming in the draft. So when they drafted him, I was thrilled. So I look at him, and I think he's a 12-year starter in this league.
100%.
Knock on wood.
Yep.
So I think he. Now the question is, again, no preseason, very limited number of practices in camp. I think all Giants fans are expecting growing pains once again here. If this was a normal year, I actually think the Nate Solder being out long term might actually be better for the Giants, because Andrew Thomas is your left tackle of the future. So he's, barring something unforeseen here, I think everyone thinks he's going to play left tackle this year. So So instead of maybe possibly starting off at right tackle his rookie season, and then next year switching over, he's going to start the experiment right now. Here, let's go. He's the guy, for better or worse. He's going to get his reps now. He's going to start working at that position. So in a way, I think long term, this may work out better for Andrew Thomas, because he's basically getting another year early under his belt. The interesting thing is the other tackle spot, because you mentioned Fleming, and now that they've extended Nick Gates' contract, and he could obviously today Coach Judge shedded more light on that. He definitely sees him as a candidate at center, but also as a candidate at tackle. So I think Nick Gates is viewed as a potential starter at either one of those spots. Mm-hmm. You've got Fleming there. When you look physically, when you look at Matt Parrott, he certainly looks the part. When you see Andrew Thomas, pictures of Andrew Thomas and video of Andrew Thomas and Matt Parrott, they look like NFL linemen. They have big, long arms. They're big guys. They're athletic. They just look like they're players that we will have to see on the football field. But that's the key spot in the center spot right now on the offensive line, because I think they're going to be all right at guard. I think Andrew Thomas, barring again the growing pains that you're going to see from your typical rookie, I think he's your starter at that spot. It's what are they going to do at center, and what are they going to do at right tackle. But they do have some options, at least at right tackle. Center is more interesting to me, because you've got, again, no preseason, very limited number of practices, and a couple of guys in the mix who are going to be conversion projects, and that's going to make things interesting.
Yeah.
Do they just go with Spencer Pulley because he's been there and he's played the position, or do they take a chance on the upside and go with the Gates, or go with one of the rookie guards that like Lemieux that they drafted? Do they look at him and say we're just going to roll the dice on somebody? Like the Giants did that back in 1984 when they had a lineman by the name of Kevin Belcher, who was a guard, and they converted him to center as a rookie, and he had a stellar rookie year, and unfortunately he had a car wreck. He was in a car wreck in the off season, and that ended his career. But they actually did this a number of decades ago with a guard, and Bill Parcells had him start at center, and it worked great for them because he ended up actually being a tremendous player for them that year.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. I agree. I think that center spot will kind of go down to the wire. I think that other tackle spot, or really both tackle spots, will too. And Nick Gates will be a key here. And I guess wherever he plays best, or wherever the next best guy plays, he'll go to that spot.
Yeah.
But, and again, much like those two cornerback spots, it'll be a real interesting thing to watch this offseason. Eric, final thing, what do you think are the expectations this year from the fans on BBI? You know, what do they think's going to happen, and what in your mind and in their mind do you think would be considered a successful season by the fan base, given the fact that it's Judge's first year, no offseason, young team, all that stuff put in the cauldron, and kind of what comes out?
I can't get the fans right now to get excited about this season because of the COVID thing. I think they're very down on this, and I think there's a lot of people that wonder if the season's going to happen right now. So you've got people that, regardless of where your stance is on all of this, some people are convinced that there's not going to be a season. Other people think the season's going to be canceled. Other people think it's going to be a mess, while other fans are optimistic. But you can sense that there are people that are still hedging their bets on this, and that's the problem. So the talk that I see is from a lot of people is that this season's going to be a mess. It's going to be a disaster. Joe Judge is probably going to get a pass on this, and should get a pass on this because nothing's going to be normal. I think it's going to be interesting in this sense. I think you're in a division right now where only one coaching staff is returning. You got the Eagles, so everybody else in the NFC East has a brand new coaching staff, and my sense is that the team that is the best prepared to handle the unusual circumstances that we're in, combined with the team that stays healthy from the COVID issue and injuries, might be surprising. If you look at a team like the New England Patriots, for instance, I think they're up to 8 or 9 players who have opted out. That's starting to whittle away at the core of a team when you start getting that many players, losing that many players. The Giants have been fairly fortunate so far in terms of the COVID impact, other than Nate Solder. So if the Giants can stay healthy, if Joe Judge has the team organized better than his opponents, then I think they can be more competitive in the short term than some fans or many fans expect. I think the overwhelming expectation, however, is this: is new coach, the COVID issue combined with no preseason, very young Giants team, starting from the quarterback, but all the way throughout the roster, extremely young team. I think most fans are thinking it's going to be tough to have a good year here, and I think they think that that they'll define success as just simply seeing progress. Now, I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic than that, but most fans are saying if the Giants are playing better football in November and December than they are playing in the early part of the season, they'll say we're building to something. We're making progress, and we can see light at the end of the tunnel. The flip side is if they're playing worse football in November and December, and I don't think this will happen because I'm a big Daniel Jones fan based on what I've seen so far. But if Daniel Jones regresses and we have a 3-13 season and we're starting to talk about quarterbacks in the draft again, that would be the nightmare scenario. I don't think that's going to happen, but there are those kinds of questions still come out. What happens if the Giants have a really, really bad year and the quarterback's not playing well? I think that would be the worst case for Mr. Mara and Mr. Tisch if they saw that. I think the best case scenario, obviously, is if they're in the playoffs, the playoff hunt still in November somehow. But that's what we'll have to see.
Yes, please don't make me take Big Blue kickoff calls in December with that happening, please.
No, I don't want to see that
please.
either. I know. I can't even imagine if we're in that position. And I don't think we will be.
No, me neither.
Again, I'm a big fan. I was a big fan of Eli Manning, but when I look at Daniel Jones' rookie year based on what he had to deal with and the players around him, I haven't seen too many rookie quarterbacks play as well as he did. And I know the fumbling was an issue, but he made throws and did things that I just said, wow. I'm really excited to see him play. Combine him with Saquon Barkley. Maybe Darius Slayton builds upon his year, and just got to get that offensive line together. And I wouldn't be surprised early if they're a little bit more conservative on offense, just so they let those young offensive linemen get their feet underneath them, because you just don't want Daniel Jones getting killed in the first 4 weeks of this season. You got to protect him a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I know I said final question, but you mentioned Daniel Jones, so I guess we should dig into that just a little bit. So final question now. With Jones, I think you hit it on the head, and it was such like a mix of greatness and just disaster in his first year. You have all those turnovers, whether it's the fumbles or the interceptions, and then you had a bunch of dropped interceptions. But then there's a guy in his face. He's throwing under pressure. He's hanging in the pocket. He's completing a pass, taking a big hit. He makes a spectacular throw here, a spectacular throw there. And I think it's really just a matter of him doing a few things, protecting the ball a little bit better. Most importantly, getting the ball out a little bit quicker, which will come from, processing a little bit faster, doing a better job of reading those defenses, which comes with experience, comes with time. And the way I put it is this, is that you've seen great play inside of him. Now it's his job to, maintain as much as he can some of those great plays. Now, if some of them go away, that's okay. But he has to limit the negative and the bad plays and the takeaways, because you could make 5 great plays. If you make 3 bad turnovers in a game, I don't care how many great plays you make, your team's not going to win. So if he can just fine-tune what I call his risk management in terms of trying to, limit the negative plays where maybe if he completes the pass, the benefit's not great, and just understand when's the appropriate time to take certain risks, when's the appropriate time is to squeeze the ball in, when it's appropriate to hold the ball a little bit longer. If he can get better at those little things and instinctual things like reading the defense, pocket presence, get rid of the ball quicker, those are the things he needs to get better. I don't see anything in his game that's quote-unquote broken, and you see when the things do work, how effective and productive he can be. Now, is there a guarantee those things get fixed this season because of a new system, new coach, no offseason? No, there's not. But I think there are clear things that if he gets better at, and they're all possible to get better at, you see how he can become that next franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack there. I'll try to keep it brief, but I agree with you. If you look at the determining factors in what wins and loses football games, it's still amazing that the turnover ratio really is a key figure. And if you look at the game statistics after each contest and just go through what every statistical category, it's so important to win that turnover battle, because you only have so many possessions per football game, and if you turn the football over, you're not only losing that possession, you're often the other team's running the other way with it for a touchdown. So that's a huge thing. I always bothers me a little bit when people start arguing, well, you hit a lot of dropped interceptions. You can make that case with any quarterback in the league. So there are lots of interceptions that get dropped by other people, by other quarterbacks. So I hate doing those, because then you can also say, well, if receivers didn't bobble the football and it got picked off, or didn't drop a football. So I never liked adding those what ifs. But I look at him and I see him make throws that when he was coming out of college, we were told he wasn't good at. One of the things I remember all the scouting reports said on him was he wasn't very accurate throwing the deep ball. And then from the very first preseason game on, he threw a wonderful deep pass after deep pass where I said, well, he wasn't supposed to be able to do this. And that he made plays. There was the one game where it was fourth and 17, and he threw that strike to Tate in the end zone for a touchdown. I think Tate actually got hurt on that play.
That was the Bear game, I think, right? End of the Bears game?
The Bear game.
Yep.
that throw, I mean, he had guys in his face. I mean, that was almost Phil Simms-like. He knew he was going to get crushed, but he knew he had to throw that football. And those are the kinds of plays where I just stood up and said, "Whoa!" I mean, that you don't see a lot of guys that do that. Now, one of the guys who writes my game reviews, Cy, he's completely on board with you on this. He says if you have a quarterback, and he harps on this all the time, and he likes Daniel Jones too, but he says what's going to determine Daniel Jones's ultimate fate is the turnovers, because if you have a quarterback that can't protect the football, he's not long for this league. You just can't do that. So he's a little bit more reserved right now. He doesn't, because he's still a little bit worried about the turnovers. And I'm not saying I'm completely discounting them. I'd be a lot more worried if Daniel Jones was throwing interceptions left and right than the fumbling issue, because a lot of the fumbles.
By the way, Eric, you're 100% right. The fumbles can be fixed 100%.
Well, I know some of those fumbles. Again, I don't want to sound like I'm excuse making here either, but some of those fumbles, he got rocked. I mean, there were some plays where he got smashed from the blind side. He wasn't holding on the ball too long in many of the instances. I mean, there was one play where two guys blew right up the middle as soon as the ball was snapped, and the ball got slapped right out of his hand, and they called it a fumble. And he said he didn't even have a chance on that play. So, again, if it happens again this year, he has as many fumbles as he did last year, then we have to start getting really worried about this. But I said this the other day too. I said, if Daniel Jones was on another NFC East team, I'd be awfully worried right now, because when I look at him, I see an excellent quarterback, and if he was in Washington or he was in Philadelphia or in Dallas, I'd be very worried right now, because from the eyeball test, when I see him play, the things that he's done as a rookie on a team that did not have a running game much of the year because Saquon was hurt, on an offensive line that still couldn't block, and then with a receiving core that was never together, and he threw 24 touchdown passes, and he had a couple of really amazing comebacks. I just thought that was a tremendous rookie season for him, and I'm very, very excited. I mean, the two things I'm really looking forward to this year is watching him develop and then seeing how the coaching staff handles his team. I'm really interested in how Joe Judge handles his team and the coaching staff that he's put together. He's got a very, very eclectic, interesting coaching staff, with a lot of experience, and I'm very interested in seeing how that coaching staff performs as well too.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think there are certainly a lot of reasons to be optimistic with Daniel Jones. And we had David Carr on our Wednesday Big Blue Kickoff show, which you can find up on Giants.com, folks, if you didn't check it out, and that'll get posted on the Huddle too. And he basically said, the same type of stuff we're saying. The stuff that Daniel Jones needs to get better at, you can get better at that. And oftentimes quarterbacks do get better at it with experience. So the opportunity is there. The talent is there. You mentioned the deep ball. To me, the stuff that jumped out to me, Eric, I watched every single one of Daniel Jones's throws that was more than 5-7 yards down the field over the course of the last month and a half. And he's actually really good on like 15 yards throws outside the numbers, where people thought coming out of school, the arm strength, he can't make those throws. He throws with accuracy and anticipation on those deep outs, and he can make those throws. So I'm with you. I don't see anything that physically that's going to hold him back. It's just a matter of whether or not he can clean up some of the mistakes. And, there's no reason to think he can't. Is there a guarantee it's going to happen? No. But I think there are certainly reasons to hope that the Giants have on their roster their next franchise quarterback for a long time. And I think we can.
And he has the work ethic. That's
100%.
So key. If you see him in the offseason just from the social media accounts, and even the brief clips we've seen from Giants.com at the early in camp, in his work, it looks like he's in tremendous shape. He was working out with the players on his own in the off season. There have been articles written on what he's going through to protect. He's got all these drills to have people try to knock the football out of his hand. Even it reminds me of the movies where there was an old movie, The Program.
Oh
where
yeah.
The player had to walk around and try to have the football knocked out of his
Omar
hand.
Epps.
So he knows what he's got to work on. He knows, and he's going to do it. There are a lot of players in this league that don't do that. They talk a good game, but they really aren't very hard working in the off season. And he's a guy that he knows what the problem is. and he's going to make every effort to try to fix it. Now, does that mean it's going to get fixed? We don't know, but you give me a guy like him with the work ethic and the intelligence, and what I thought was kind of funny too was Joe Judge came in, and for weeks and weeks he wasn't going to mention the name of any player on the Giants roster. Everybody was at an equal, everybody was on equal status, no special treatment. He wouldn't even mention Barkley's name. But the first time he mentioned anybody's name, it was Daniel Jones, and he just gushed about him. So he went from saying, I'm not going to say anything nice about anybody, to, wow, I'm really impressed with this kid. So even Joe Judge saw something where he said, well, there's something here. So I thought that was very telling, too.
Eric, I'm with you, and I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Excellent stuff, my friend. One more time, tell the folks where they can check out everything on Big Blue Interactive.
Yeah, it's bigblueinteractive.com is the URL, and again, we have a big Giants community over there that loves talking football, and when they win, all celebrate, and when they lose, we're all over complaining. So it's a good place to hang out. So.